So I just want to talk about, use three pictures to try and set the scene for what we're talking about. Now, the company I run, Cartesia, we've been building technology companies since about 1997. We've done close to 100. And when I say building, it means actually rolling up the sleeves, finding partners, creating products and services, finding investors, putting money in, doing all the things which, and the verb building is deliberately used in a construction sense of the word. And when we looked at all the companies that we've done and been involved in, we said, what can we learn about the challenges of building businesses? And we discovered there are actually three chasms in terms of building businesses. And those of you who will have read Geoffrey Moore's famous book, Crossing the Chasm, written in California in about 1994-95, will know that he talks about the challenge of scale. And that's the third chasm, what I call the classical Moore chasm. And that's the bit typically that US VCs are interested in, where they can put money in and see a rapid scale up. The challenge is there are really three chasms. The first chasm is taking an idea or a concept and demonstrating it in a prototype product or a prototype service. And we're actually very good at that in the UK. We have a lot of funding through the universities, through the Technology Strategy Board for proof of concept funding. So we're very good at generating initial ideas and being able to say, here, look, this thing actually works. The second chasm, which is a bit in the middle, some people refer to it as the valley of death. In my view, this is actually the real challenging chasm. And that chasm is where you have a product or a service which you've sort of demonstrated, but to turn that into something that has commercial value, you need to work on refining the product or service, you need to understand customers, markets, you need to understand the business model, how are you actually going to make money from it. So it's not sufficient to basically say, I've built this wonderful product, and somebody's bound to find it useful or somebody's bound to find it valuable, which has largely been the experience of technology-driven companies across Europe. Build it and they will come. And we have many examples of companies that have followed that philosophy and have succeeded in spite of that, not because of it. Facebook is a classic example of that, in spite of any post-rationalization they might now try to make around why they were successful. So you can play the numbers game, and in that sort of situation, something like 1 in 10,000 businesses can succeed on that statistical basis. Or you can be much more determined. And so that second chasm is the real challenge here. And if you look on that graph on the left-hand side, you look at all the key enablers. So these are the things that you need in order to build. And you can see research grants, incubators, grants from the European Union, the Technology Strategy Board, and then you get VCs, you get corporates, you get private equity and VC. And you can see that the big challenge we face is around chasm 2. Because if you go far enough to the right, then banks will lend you money. They will give you money because they can assess the risk, they can measure the market. So how many of you in this room have been in a situation where you've gone to pitch to a VC with an idea and they've said, can we see your market data? Well, have you validated your market? Yeah. And if you're building something new, of course, you're creating a new market. There is no market. Or there may not be a new market. Or it's so early, it's so nascent, you can't actually provide reliable data. And so that second chasm, in my view, is the challenge. And the work we've been doing with the creative industries, KTN, where I play this part-time role, it's a great title. It's called, I think, Investment and Finance Theme Champion, which means you can kind of make it up to mean whatever you want it to mean. But the way we've interpreted it is to say there is a lot of public sector money going into the areas that we're all working in. And how do we leverage that with private money? And how do we make that equation work? How can we increase the likelihood of our startups becoming successful businesses? They're grown-up businesses with revenues. And so that second chasm is something that we've run lots of events, we've been talking to people, we talk to VCs, we talk to banks about how can we fix that challenge. And some of the speakers this morning will actually talk about that. Now, the thing about that is it's great. So all the things I've been saying are generic about businesses, and particularly so for technology, businesses still in a very generic sense. Now when we come to the Internet of Things, so what challenges does this pose for us? For a start, it's a very technology-centric view of the world. The idea that any thing can have an IP address and be connected over an infrastructure. So by definition, it's like having a piece of technology looking for a market. And virtually every company that I've seen in this space starts with the technology. Some start with a product or a service. As very little attention has been paid, in my view, to what the market's actually looking for and how you impedance match or connect your idea to the market. And so this is a 7-layer model, a piece of work that we actually did years ago for the European Union, which we thought actually shed some light, and of course they published it in several books, and then catalogued it, and then ignored it, which is pretty much the lesson. And the 7-layer model, basically, I'm going to walk through very quickly. It says start with the customer first. Everything you're doing, who's actually going to use and pay for what you are making or selling. And that customer space, second piece of clarity, especially in Internet of Things, is who's paying? Is it the consumer, or is it another business who are going to reach a consumer? So the point about this is to actually say, have that clarity in terms of, and those grids are being mapped deliberately in that way, and the smartest amongst you, or the most awake with all that coffee with the high caffeine content, you'll notice that you could map every creative media business on that grid. So for example, the BBC would be in the bottom right-hand quadrant, BBC One transmissions, and 7 or 8 million viewers on a Saturday evening would be in the bottom right-hand corner, very consumer-facing service, about 4 or 5, 7 or 8 million viewers. If you had a website which pitched, say, for Cuban jazz musicians, it'd be again over in that consumer space, a special segmentation, and it'd be quite a small audience. You'd probably get 50,000 people going there. And it's important to understand how many people are actually going to buy your product or service. So the whole point of this is a simple mapping exercise. And if you look on there, the Financial Times, some of you might be reading it coming in this morning, where does the FT sit? It's actually read by individuals, by consumers, and also by corporates who take it on subscription. So it sits smack back in the middle. But their subscription numbers are something like 120,000 at the moment. And that doesn't include all the free copies they give to MBA students and all the business schools around the UK. Now, customers buy products and services, they don't buy technology. And so the point about that is what's sitting behind that. And in order for them to find what they're going to buy, they need meta content. So if you're consuming a TV program, where do you go? You go to the TV guide, you go to the program guide. You need some place where you can actually find the stuff that you're going to get, and then behind that actually sits the real content. And then behind the content sits the infrastructure that's able to deliver all this content. And then the infrastructure itself consists of a whole set of application technologies where you've bolted stuff together. So when somebody says, the ARM person here yet? No, we're expecting somebody from ARM later today. ARM have a chip. Okay, actually have a design for a chip which is manufactured under license in the Far East, and it goes into Apple devices. So what they have is they have some base technology components. So when you start talking to ARM about saying, would you like to invest in my Internet of Things company, the thing to bear in mind is they're sitting right at the back there. Where are you sitting in that space? Are you sitting right down the end? Are you dealing directly with your customers? Or are you sitting somewhere behind? Are you building the infrastructure? Are you the people who provide bandwidth, for example, for IOT? And David Cleveley, who will be here shortly, who's chairman of NEWL. NEWL, for example, is trying to design a new network to be able to provide data transport at a very low cost per bit. So he'll come and talk about that. In fact, no, that's not him. But okay, so just what these are really a few pointers. Many years ago, I read a book about how Obama constructs his speeches, and I don't know if some of you are classical scholars, you'll know that Cicero had this rule of threes, which is what he said is the human mind can only remember 3 things at any point in time. So the 3 things I want you to remember here are, number 1, there are multiple chasms. We understand where you're sitting in terms of in which chasms have you crossed, because that tells you about the kind of partners you're going to need and the kind of investors you can talk to. There's no point talking to a VC if you're on the left-hand side. Message 1, figure out where you are. Message 2, think about the detail of how you're going to cross those chasms. And most of you will be in chasm 2, so think about how you actually increase your chances of crossing that. And the third point is, think where you are in the market space. What exactly are you doing in the overall scheme of things? And who are your natural partners? Who are your natural competitors? And what are you missing in order to reach your customers? And hence, out of that comes a business model. I have yet to see, of the businesses we see something like 1% of them actually have any kind of viable business model. Usually, when they explain the idea with great enthusiasm and then you ask them some questions, within 2 minutes they're back again telling you what a wonderful idea it was. When the question I'm asking is, where's the money? Okay, so that's my introduction.